Welcome, welcome everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another Playground Sessions live lesson. Today I'm excited because we're going to continue our conversation about how to practice better. We talk about practicing all the time, right? You got to practice, don't forget to practice, practice more. But how often do you hear people talk about practicing better, right? It's not just about clocking in the time. You need to make sure you're being productive, you're working on your goals, and that you're building muscle memory and correct technique. That's a tall order. So this is a good topic. I'm glad we voted on this. Today I'm going to continue to practice in front of you guys for a little bit, and so that will be fun. Probably more fun for you than it is for me. But nonetheless, I was glad to hear people thought it was a valuable lesson to show how I practice sight reading. I don't expect to get 100% on advanced sight reading, but that's not really my goal. My primary goal in sight reading is to practice quick note recognition and then move on to the next note, try and recognize that, always stay ahead of the beat, and so on, right? So anyways, we're going to do a bit more of that today. But before we get started, I wanted to let you know next week is going to be a really special event as well in our normally scheduled live lessons here on YouTube, and that is that we're going to have David Sides back on as a guest. Now, I brought him on a month or so ago to do a live Q&A with you guys. We kind of had an interview, so to speak, and then you guys had the chance to ask him questions in the chat. That was also met really positively, so we're going to bring David back, but because we're talking about practicing this month, I thought it would be a special opportunity for us to get a little glimpse into David Sides' practice routine. What does David Sides do when he sits down to practice? Is it different than what I do or what you do? Or is some of it the same? What does his normal average practice session look like? How much time does he spend? What does he work on? We're going to get deep into it with David next week at the same time 1 week from today. So 6 p.m. Eastern, and that's Wednesday. I believe that is the 22nd. Is that right? Okay. So that is going to be a fun one. Make sure you mark your calendars. And if you have questions for David Sides about his practice or anything else you'd like to ask him, make sure you show up a little early to the stream next week and you can write your questions in the chat. All right, let's get started by talking about practicing for today's lesson. Specifically, I'd like to hear from you guys. I want your help to help me figure out where to steer this lesson today. And specifically, I want you to let me know about your practice goals. I told you last week it's really important to set practice goals. If you have an hour to practice, what's your goal? Is it to practice for an hour? That's not enough. You got to get a little more structure in there if you want to maximize your productivity. And so to do that, one of the first steps is to set goals. Many of you, in fact, here in the chat in previous weeks have asked me, how long should I be practicing X? Or how long will it take me before I'm good at Y? Or how many scales should I do, right? The answer to most of those questions is, it depends on your goals. So that's the first step. Now, when I sit down to practice, I tend to have similar goals. Me personally, I'll sit down to practice something that I need to learn before I teach it, usually for my work here, right? Which is to be your guys' teacher. So I have to sit down and learn songs sometimes to teach. And I typically like to warm up a little before I do that. I'll show you a bit of what I do there. And then when I'm done learning the song that I have to learn for my work, I tend to also put in some time of pure improvisation where I don't judge what I'm playing, and there's really no way to do it wrong as long as I feel free and open and expressive. So that's part of my practice goals. But for those of you who want to get better at sight reading, for example, I probably would not say you should practice improvising. And vice versa. If your goal is to be the greatest improviser you can be, I probably wouldn't say spend a lot of time sight reading. So let me know in the chat. I want to hear from all of you, especially those of you who don't chime in on a regular basis. Let me know what are some of your practice goals, even if you don't have a question about it or a comment about it. But for those who do have questions, I'm here to help with that too. So in the meantime, what I'd like to do now is get into a little bit of notation practice. And I'm going to give you guys a moment, or a few moments I should say, to think about a practice goal that you'd like to set for yourself this week, and or to think about a practice challenge that you've been met with recently, or anything else practice related. Let's keep it open-ended. But for now, let's get into a little bit of practice. So what I want to do now is cue up the right hand piece of notation that I was trying to sight read last week. I haven't seen it since then, but what I'm going to do today is a bit different. I'm not going to sight read it. I'm not going to try and work on that skill in my practice session right now. Instead, I'm going to actually work on learning this. And the reason I want to call that out as something different from reading, or from sight reading, I should say, is because I'm going to spend much more time with my attention and my eyes on the keyboard here. I'm going to look over at the notation and learn this a little bit by little bit. And then I'm going to go back to the keyboard and I'm going to work on it over and over again until my hands feel comfortable with the shapes and until my eyes feel comfortable recognizing those shapes, right? And anticipating those shapes and seeing them as shapes. That's important too, instead of individual notes. So I'm going to use the score as a reference, and then I'm going to come back to the keyboard and I'm going to really put in that repetitive work, okay? I'm also not going to hit play in the app and put the pressure of playing this at a full tempo. Instead, I'm going to work on playing this nice and slow. So a couple things to remember. I'm going to do this slowly. I'm also going to take this bit by bit and practice each bit over and over again. So I'm going to get some repetition in there as well. It requires you to be patient, yes, right? We can't just jump right in and dive in. You've got to be patient here. But that's another one of these skills that when it comes to practicing, if you can be patient with yourself, you'll see better results. So that's what we're going to do now. I want to just walk through a bit of this, right? So because I don't have the pressure of sight reading this, I'm going to take my time to analyze. And by the way, I just want to let you guys know, I had some issues connecting the app for this stream. So what we're seeing here in notation is actually just static notation. You're not going to see the scroll bar move through with this one, but I still wanted to give you at least the image of the notation that I'm going to be working on. And by the way, this is an excerpt from the Theorists' arrangement of John Legend's new song, Conversations in the Dark. If you haven't checked out his cover of that yet, it's really, really awesome. We've got the whole thing in the Playground Sessions song store. You can also check out his YouTube channel to see his cover. He's a beast. And he loves to do stuff like what you're seeing on screen here. Chords in the right hand and melody notes in the right hand. So I'm just kind of doing a broad overview here. By the way, this is all clocked time against my goal of learning a song. So let's say I have 45 minutes to practice. I'm going to spend 30 on learning this song. And right now, this analysis is part of that. Okay, so I see 5 sharps in the key signature. I definitely don't want to forget about that. And what I'd like to do actually is go through this looking at the shapes. Now the first thing we see here is the easiest thing to identify as a shape, because it is a chord. It's a chord shape, a block chord. But then what we see after that looks like a bunch of individual notes. But what I would like to do, oh, look at this. I already messed up. Here, I got to remember my key signature. That's actually a D sharp on the bottom. So B major chord. Now what we need to do next is think of the next passage as a structure instead of individual notes. Okay, how do we see that as one structure? Well, I see this as a continuation of that B major harmony sound. So here's the first chord. What we see next is this. It's kind of a strange little 2-note chord on its own, but if you think about that top note as belonging to a little melodic figure, then it's a passing tone. Check it out. That C sharp there leads us back and forth to the third of the chord and back down to the root of the chord. So this is just a nice extended way of playing a nice B major harmony with the melody on top. We start with the chord, then we get to this chord. I'm noticing some repetition here in thematic material in the second half of this measure, so I'm going to lean on that. Notice I'm not playing in time. My rhythms are not even yet, and that's okay. The point of my exercise right now is to let my hand sort of skim across the shapes that we're going to see in this passage. So measure 7 here, or the third measure we see on screen, is actually a great example of how a lot of different notes that seem unrelated can actually be all one structure. So take a look at this measure. Okay, that entire measure just used combinations of one or more of these 4 notes. That is just a straight up G sharp minor chord right there. But look at the interesting stuff the theorist did in the arrangement. He plays this note first, then he plays some outside notes, then he goes to 16th notes to arpeggiate this chord in a rhythm that is offset from the strong beats. It's pretty cool. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Actually, let me count this in 4/4. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Now that's kind of syncopated and the phrasing is shifted on the beat, which is actually really cool. But if you think about that as all individual notes, it's going to be tough to play and kind of take a while to memorize. But if you can think about that as just all one shape that you're moving through, it all becomes kind of one thing, right? So that's one thing I want you to take away with here. Next measure. Same idea here. We're doing a similar arpeggiation pattern through a different chord. And now instead of a G sharp minor chord, we're doing it through first an E major chord and then an E major 7 chord. So slight change, but still there's a lot of structure here that we can see, a lot of shapes we can see here. Then we're back to that B major harmony again, excuse me. And a little different ending there. Okay, so I feel like now I've gotten through my skim, right, of this section. Now there shouldn't be any surprises. I've gotten that surprise take out of the way. So I'm going to go through now and try actually playing with a little bit more even tempo. But I'm still going to do it slow. Don't forget, slow practice is key. But before I do that, you guys, speaking of practice, I need to throw a curveball at you here and throw one at Aiden as well, because I need to give you guys the opportunity to learn a free song credit. I realized last week I forgot. I almost forgot again today. So boom, pop quiz. You guys, it's been a while, and you've heard me talk about practice a lot over the last few weeks. You've also probably heard me talk about practice for the last few years of teaching, if you've been around that long. And, you know, I have a question for you that hopefully by now you guys will be able to answer, although it isn't something I specifically spelled out last week, for example. But we're going to try it, okay? For those who are new, here's how the pop quizzes work. I'm going to ask a question, and you guys are going to write in the chat what you believe the answer is going to be. Since this is pop quiz number 1, I'd like you to write a 1 and then a dash in your chat answer, and then give me your answer. The answer to this question is either going to be A or B. Not notes, but option A or option B. Which one is better for your practicing? Option A, is it better to practice for a 4-hour session in one day? 4 hours to get everything done. And you do that once a week. That's option A. Is that better than option B? Option B is you practice a total of 3 hours throughout the entire week, but you do a little bit every day. So by the end of the week, you've got 3 hours of practice in, but you've stretched it out. That's option B. Option A is getting it all in one day, 4 hours straight. So by the end of the week, you've got 4 hours of practice, but you had 6 days off in between. That's the question. I'm looking for the first 3 correct answers that I see. So 3 people can win a song credit on this question. The correct answer should either be, the correct answer will be 1 dash and then either A or B. And I'm just going to play a little bit here. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and practice through my section one more time in tempo. So let's go ahead and pretend that you're hearing the Jeopardy theme song to give yourself some time to answer. And I'm going to play through this one more time. When I'm done, I'll pick the winners. Okay, even that run through was helpful because I realized I made a little mistake. That was easy to fix. And honestly, guys, I would be repeating this thing a lot of times, minimum 10 times. That's what I always say. But I'd be doing that even more than 10. And so every little bit of repetition counts. I really want to hammer home that point of repetition. But let me get back to the pop quiz now. The question was, what's better, option A or option B? And let's see if we have any winners. I'm going to ask Andrew. Andrew's in the building tonight, helping to moderate the chat here. So Andrew, who was our first correct answer?
Adrienne Gritani.
Adrienne Gritani. Woo! The answer was, of course, option B. Andrew told me like I didn't know. The option was B. And now, guys, I'm not going to tell you that practicing for 4 hours one day and then not practicing for 6 days is bad. If you can get a practice session in for 4 hours, that will be awesome. And if you can't practice the next 6 days, look, hey, you still got a really solid day in, right? But the thing I want you guys to remember about this question is that it's not as important to tally up your total amount of time in the end. Sure, that's something, it's helpful. But I believe what's more important than your total time is how little time you spend not practicing in between practice sessions. Does that make sense? You don't want what you practiced in the first day to get cold over the next 6, right? You've got to keep that up. So because of that, the correct answer was B. Even if you get less total time in at the end of the week, if you practice every day, you're going to be able to build on those skills a lot better. So I told you guys there'd be 3 correct answers. Andrew, who was the second correct answer?
Elta John.
Elta John! Pew, 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 pew. All right, Elta. There's a free song credit for you as well. And Andrew, who was the third correct winner?
Robert Atkins.
Robert Atkins. Great work, everyone. Give yourselves a round of applause. In case you don't know, if you win a free song credit in a pop quiz on Playground's YouTube live lessons, in order to redeem them, you have to email support. And if you say, "Attention, Andrew," and you say, "I want a free song credit in Phil's live stream last night," then Andrew will supply you with that free song credit to your account. All right, guys, well, let's get back into it. What I'm going to do now is pretend I've repeated this right-hand section a bunch, and now I'm going to try it at full speed. Now, I know that I don't have the app here, so I'm going to kind of make up my own full speed. But once I do that, I'm going to shift gears to the left hand, all right? Here we go. 3, 4. Cool. Okay, let's shift gears now to the left hand. And let's take a peek at that notation. Now, the left hand is pretty busy here, and again, that's really common for the theorist's arrangements. But what's great about his arrangements, in my opinion, is the left hand can be as busy as can be, but you never lose the melody in his arrangements, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to walk through nice and slow, and I'm going to look for chord shapes and structures that I can assign these notes to. I can see all these notes belong to one harmony, B major. Now we remember in the right hand we're playing this, right? That first chord is B major, so here we see the same thing, right? So I'm fast forwarding ahead a bit to hands together, but for the right hand we already know it's B major harmony, so the left hand we can infer it's probably not going to be an unrelated harmony, right? We can expect it's likely B. And sure enough it is. So now I'm going to practice this little pattern because it's 16th notes and it's a little bit strange. So this is where the slow repetition comes in. Okay, I'll do it again. 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and And it can take several times at a slow tempo before you feel like moving on. And I'll do the same thing for the next measure. I can tell I'm already jumping down to this D sharp. You go all the way up there, and it seems like a lot of notes, but they all belong to that one harmony. And we can tell, by the way, when we're working at the left-hand part, because there's chord symbols, right? That's kind of a shorthand for what harmony the notes are going to be outlining. So when I see a D sharp minor chord symbol, and then I see a bunch of notes flying up, when I'm sight reading, I'm actually looking at that chord symbol, and then I'm going to fill this in the left hand to something that I think is close enough. I'm going to do something like this. All that is D sharp minor arpeggios. It's just one harmony. Okay, but we got to figure out where it ends. So we go root, fifth, root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth. Rest, rest, rest. No, that's not right. Yes, it is right. Okay, cool. So then now what I'll do is zoom back out. After I've practiced this, on its own, then I'll put those two measures together. I'm being very patient here. I'm not moving on to the third measure yet. Let's see if we can put together the first measure and the second measure. And I'm now going to dial back my tempo, by the way. I got each hand on its own feeling good at a pretty good speed, at least for these two measures. But when we put the hands together, when we add more challenges, this is still just left hand, but we're now going to put both measures together. So I'm going to slow it down a bit, make sure I can do it all live. So there, that forced me to really practice that transition between the two measures. I'll isolate that again. Excuse me. So that transition, you've got to jump down to that D sharp pretty quickly. You're here in this B major octave shape. You got your two finger on F sharp, and your pinky has to reach all the way down in 1/16 notes time to there. So you may want to give yourself extra practice of just isolating that motion right there. And stop there. And practice it, 10, 20, 30 times, whatever it takes. Remember, at least 10 times correctly. That's important. I've said that before. You don't want to do it 10 times, but the first 9 were mistakes, and then the 10th one was correct. Once you get it correct, you want to do at least 10 times at that correct, the correct way, because that's the best way to build that muscle memory. But it may take you longer, and that's okay. But then you want to start to speed that up and zoom back out so you can play all of it, including the transition, nice and smooth. And you can do the same thing in the next measure, and I'll do that now. So we'll go down to a G sharp, and again, I'll consult my chord symbol, G sharp minor. Pretty certain that first note's going to be a G sharp. Pretty sure there's going to be some B naturals in there. Okay. Okay, this one has a different pattern again, so I'm going to walk through this one a little bit slower. Octave down to G sharp. Okay, now I'll do it again. Now I'll speed it up. Even faster. Oops. All right, feeling better there. So now what I'm going to do is back up and try the second measure into this third measure. Or if you're looking at the measure numbers in the notation, it'd be measure 6 going into measure 7. Nope. Nope. See, I'm already forgetting. My hand is forgetting. So I'm going to repeat measure 6 now a little bit. I'm going to be patient with myself. Then we go to G sharp here. The thing we just practiced. Okay, I'm going to do it again. Back to measure 6. Okay, might do that several more times, but for now, I want to fast forward. I'm going to do measure 5, 6, and 7 together. Oh. There we go. Let's see if I can do it a little faster. Almost. Now, I don't want to gloss over that moment. I pretty much got 98% on that little run through, but I played a slightly wrong rhythm. Do not forget that what we're doing right now is building muscle memory. For every time you play it wrong, you've got to redeem yourself, maybe 3 times right, okay? Because this is a game. This is a kind of a challenge against your own body, right? Everything your hand does, it's going to learn. So you have to make sure you're outpacing the mistakes with actual correct takes so that your hand comes out, I guess you could call it net positive of, correct takes. And that's a good goal in general here, okay, no matter what you're working on when you're practicing building muscle memory. Guys, what I'd like to do now is just pause and go back to the chat because I asked you guys earlier about your practice goals, and I want to see if anyone chimed in. I do see some comments and some good questions. I see Wander Lopez, what is the best book for beginners? Charles Smith is asking questions about subdividing. I see Robert Atkins, one of our winners tonight, asking about a tool on Playground Sessions that they can list their goals for practice. That's a good idea. All right, so let's talk about that. So practice goals as they relate to the app. So this is going to be kind of an answer to Robert as well as I'm going to kind of indirectly answer Wander Lopez's question as well. And I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. There are a ton of good books for beginners, of course. In my experience as a teacher, before joining Playground Sessions, I taught for about 10 years in individual lessons with one-on-one students or in groups. And I wasn't really doing full-time digital lessons like this until more recently with Playground Sessions. So I was using those books a lot more. And I'll tell you that many of them, honestly, are the same, or mostly the same, because you're really just teaching the fundamentals at that beginner level. And there's not a ton of different ways to really introduce that stuff. Now, of course, some books get more creative than others. Some try to reinvent the whole, method, and others fall in between. I can tell you that some of the top books, are going to be the Alfred series, the Faber stuff, Piano Adventures. That stuff is classic. But honestly, Playground Sessions, and I don't mean for this to be too much of a plug here, like you've set me up for this, but Playground Sessions has a lot of the same content that you're going to find in beginner level books, except it's also got a lot more, right? You can get your performances graded as you play. You can slow things down. You've got backing tracks. And so what I really want to say to you, Wander Lopez, is I'll tie it back to goals. What's your goal for learning the piano as a beginner? What do you want to end up doing? And how do you want to get there? What do you want your practice experience to look like? If you've got a piano at home and you want to have a book on your music stand, that's great. That's tried and true, right? But if you want to just learn the best way as a beginner, I'm actually going to go ahead and confidently point you to Playground Sessions as an interactive app to help you as a beginner. And I'm going to go ahead and plug that we're doing a free trial for 30 days just for YouTubers. And if you go to playgroundsessions.com/YouTube-free-trial, I might actually ask Andrew to type that out in the chat as well at some point today. You can take advantage of a 30-day free trial of the full paid app experience. So there's my plug for you, Wander Lopez. I hope that helps. But of course, there's great books out there too. Robert Atkins asked if there's going to be a tool in Playground so that individuals can list their goals for the day. I don't know of any plans for that, Robert, but there's a couple of new things that we are developing. We don't expect to launch this in the next iteration of the app, but we are working on a functionality in the app for teachers who have students. And those teachers can then use Playground for their students. That's something that we're going to be trying to bring into action at some point in the future. And when we do that, we're definitely going to be probably adding some custom tools for teachers, including the ability to assign certain practices to their students, as well as maybe upload their own XML for their students, as well as potentially being able to keep a practice log for students that then teachers can then look at and approve, for example. Or for students who don't need the teacher, just someone like you, Robert Atkins, who you're just using the app yourself, maybe then you'd be able to utilize something like that too. But in the meantime, you know, lucky for us, a practice log can be created in really any setting, including pad and paper, a notes app, Google Doc, and so on, right? There's also journal apps, things like that have more bells and whistles. Take a look. I mean, see what would work best for you. The important thing is that you are coming up with a goal, you're documenting that goal, and then you're holding yourself accountable to trying to reach that goal. That's crucial. Now, whether you use an app or a notepad or it's within Playground app, you know, that's secondary. I got a question here from Jace Beyblade. That's a cool name. 30-second notes are hard, indeed. Actually, can I see that question one more time? There we go, thanks. So, one more time, Andrew. Sorry, everyone, just pulling up this comment again. So Jace says, 30-second notes are hard. What tempo is good to practice them? Interesting. This brings up a couple of points for me. A practice tempo is something that should be considered flexible. In other words, it depends on where you are in the practicing of those 30-second notes. If it's the first time you're going to work on them, I would suggest way slowing the tempo down to the point where 30-second notes almost are like quarter notes, you know? And the tempos are subjective, but look, here's a standard tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. 30-second notes would be... I can't even do it at that tempo. So you have to slow it down. 30-second notes, you get 8 of them per beat. So I would fully suggest that you use your metronome to slow things down. And in fact, you don't always have to use the metronome click as a quarter note. You can have clicks representing 8th notes or 16th notes if you want. So you could set your metronome to here. If those were quarter notes, you'd be doomed. But if those are 16th notes, then 30-second notes would be this. If these are 30-second note clicks, then 30-second notes would be this. So you can assign your metronome clicks to a certain rhythmic value that's less than a quarter note. That can help. But my answer here to you in the broader sense would be that when you start practicing anything, and yes, fast, quick rhythms are definitely a part of that, you need to start slow. I can't stress that enough. And however slow the tempo needs to be for you personally to feel comfortable, that is the correct tempo, because that might change from person to person. But what's important is then how do you gradually increase your tempo through your practice session? In the app, we typically have a slow tempo button and a normal tempo button, because those are the kind of the common tempos used. But I definitely want to encourage everyone to use all the in-betweens as well, all the in-between tempos. When you're practicing something, you want to first do it slow, but your next step is not to do it at full speed, especially when you're talking about fast rhythms. Instead, you want to gradually increase your tempo. So pick whatever tempo, Jace, is good for you so that you can do those notes comfortably, even if it's this fast for 30-second notes. That would be really slow, but that's okay. And then the next thing should not be this. It should be, okay, a little faster. And speed it up a little bit and a little bit until you start to feel, oh man, this is challenging, and then sit there in that tempo for a long time, more than you would expect, you guys. Repetition and patience is crucial. And then when that tempo becomes your comfortable tempo, then it's time for you to speed it up a little more. That can be a long process, but I hope that answers your question, Jace. It's kind of depends on where you're at with what you're practicing and where you're at with your skill level and how often you can clock in to practice. All right? What I'd like to do now, guys, is briefly skip to the both hands together notation for what we've been working on today. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, and I'm going to assume that we're going to pretend that I've gone through each measure and we've got everything perfect from one hand at a time. My right hand's good, left hand's good. So now we're at the point where we want to practice the both hands together. This is really important here because it seems like we might be kind of almost at the end of our work, right? We've already got the right hand, we've already got the left hand. All we need to do is put them together, right? Well, technically, yes, but it's a lot harder than that. It's not as easy as just, boop, now I can do them together. Because there's all sorts of new considerations, including independent rhythms between the hands, syncopations between the hands, or even just in general, and all sorts of hand position changes, fingerings, things that are easy enough to do when we're only focusing on one hand. But it becomes exponentially harder when you have them both together. So how do we get started in a situation like this? You're sitting down to practice, and it's time to put the hands together. Where do you start? Well, I strongly recommend starting with 0 tempo. Even wait until your next practice session to even consider trying to do this in time. And instead, just walk through beat by beat. The main goal here is to figure out when the hands play together and when they play individually. So I'm going to walk through now and kind of speak to that as we go. This is kind of maybe an example of what your inner monologue could be as you're practicing as well. All right, I see they play together. And then I see the left hand moves on. And I'm actually going to get my right hand out of the way. I'm going to use my sustain pedal to keep this chord going because the left hand creeps up into the right hand's chord. But then here, you've got to switch. Switch this thumb with the right hand thumb. Right? Already we're seeing this is posing more challenges than we predicted. Because now that we're putting the hands together, we're seeing there's a bit of conflict. That's what we want to aim for, but it might take a lot of practice at this speed right here. Ready? Okay, and then I'm going to put next, I see the next beat, the hands are together, and then they're together for the rest of these 16th notes. Okay, next measure, right hand's going to this little 2-note chord, left hand's jumping all the way down to there. And again, we're going to get the right hand out of the way so that the left hand can move. This is all the kind of analysis and thought that you need to be having, whether it's internally or you're talking out loud like I am, if you want to be able to put these hands together successfully. Right now what we're doing is prepping ourselves for the long game. We're kind of doing some analysis and some preparation so that when we do hit play or we do, turn on our metronome, we're better for it. Patience, my friends, that's the name of the game, all right? So then when you finally map that out and your hands are getting used to the coordination, that's when you want to introduce tempo. But you actually, in my opinion, you want it to be almost too easy of a slow tempo in the beginning. You want it to be easy enough for your hands to be able to do it, okay? So I'm going to do something like this. Now I'm thinking about even timing. Even timing is important now. I'm shifting my challenge in my practice time to that. But I'm going slow enough. By the way, these are 30-second notes, right? No, they're not. Sorry, I misread. They're 16s. All right, well, that was just me having fun. But I hope you guys see what I'm talking about. What I did the first time through had no even timing whatsoever. What I did next, in the next phase of practicing this, was to introduce timing, but to have it be so slow that I would easily be able to do it. And if I was going to continue to practice for you guys today for longer, you better believe I would be doing it again at that tempo. Then I'd speed it up a little bit, Jace, to get back to your question. I'd speed it up just a little bit, and then I'd do it again a few times. Then I'd speed it up a little bit more, and so on, until I'm able to do it more like... Right? I can't do it yet, but that's my goal, and that might take me several practice sessions. It might take several weeks, right? And that's okay. All right, guys, I got another opportunity for someone to win some free song credits, so let's get it going with another pop quiz. Making sure you guys are still with me here, making sure you're still awake. All right, who wants to win a free song credit? Remember, this is the second pop quiz, so you need to put a number 2 and a dash before your answer, okay? The correct answer here is going to be a number. I'm going to ask you a question, and your answer is going to be 2 dash and then a number, okay? You ready for the question? I've said it a few times. I've even said it today. What is my rule as a teacher for the minimum amount of correct practice attempts in order for you to feel like you've built muscle memory and you can move on? The minimum amount of correct repetitions. I'm looking for a single number. So the answer will be 2 dash and then your number. How many times is the minimum amount of times for correct repetitions in your practice? And I'll just play here for a second. In fact, why don't I keep practicing the hands together? Nope, you don't want to build bad muscle memory, so I'm going to go back and slow it down. All right, and I'll pause there. See if we have any answers come through yet. Do we have any correct answers? I'm just looking for the first correct answer.
Yeah, we do.
And is it someone, Andrew, that did not win in the first pop quiz?
Yes.
All right, who is our winner for pop quiz number 2?
Sarah Pickles.
Sarah Pickles! Pew, 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 pew. I got to get a ham horn that I can actually hit for you guys.
Can't use it.
Sarah, you got to get the app. You know what, Sarah? This is the last free song credit you get to win until you are a member of the Playground Sessions app. Just kidding, Sarah, but it's funny that you always win and then you never have any app to apply it to. So Sarah is super nice, you guys. Sometimes she'll donate her free song credit to someone else. I don't know, I won't presume she'll do that today, but if she doesn't have the app, maybe we can. Sarah, let us know. Are you going to use the song credit this time, or should we pick the next winner? You get the honorable mention either way, Sarah. So kudos. By the way, the correct answer is 10. You got to do it. Look, this is subjective, but that's why I said, what's my rule, right? I personally believe you do something 10 times in a row the correct way, chances are you're going to have that into your muscle memory at least a bit, right? You're going to be building on that. And on the flip side, if you do something 9 times wrong, and then you do it 1 time right, which one do you think your hand has learned? What's in your hand's muscle memory? The wrong way or the right way? In that instance, it would be the wrong way. You did that 9 times and the right way only once. So let's say you're in that example, right? You do it 9 times wrong, then you do it right on the 10th time. Well, now you say to yourself, okay, now I've got to do it 10 times in a row from there. So that's why the correct answer here is 10. Good work, everyone. Has Sarah let us know what she wants to do with her free song credit?
Yeah, she's giving it to Jace.
Oh, you're giving it to Jace. Oh, she gets to pick now. Interesting. I like that because Jace gave a great question and helped us steer that lesson. And because Jace is, I believe, a new name for me at least in the chat. So thanks for joining us, Jace. And thank you, Sarah. That was very generous of you. You guys, I I've got time for about one more question, and then I'm going to get out of here for the day. Don't forget, everyone, next week we're going to be bringing David Sides back in live, in a Zoom setting, of course, that is. But we're going to be able to get a glimpse into his practice routines, and you guys will also have the chance to ask him some questions. So don't forget about that. I want to answer a question from Lily May. Lily says, I struggle with reading ledger lines. Any tips for helping with this when sight reading? Yeah, Lily May, great question. So there's a couple of things that go into that. You brought up two good points. One, how do I get better at recognizing ledger lines? And two, how can I do that specifically when sight reading? Those are two different things, right? We all know, every good boy does fine, right? But if you're sight reading something and you see a note on the top line, are you really saying every good boy does fine before you play it? Maybe, but probably not if you're sight reading it, because chances are you're not going to have enough time to do that kind of processing. So I want to answer this question in two ways. I want to answer it, one, if you were not sight reading, if you're just learning a piece of music, how can you get better at recognizing those ledger lines? And then the second thing I'll say is more directly to answer your question, Lily May, which is how can you get better at that specifically when sight reading? So the first thing is when you're just learning it, right? We have these mnemonics. Every good boy does fine, and face for the treble staff, right? I want to draw your attention to the treble staff, and I want to talk about the 5 lines and 4 spaces, right? Treble staff, every good boy does fine, and face, right? That covers it all. Now, what's the top line? Every good boy does fine. That's F, right? F is also the starting note of our face mnemonic. This F just happens to be an octave higher. But that F is the top line of the treble staff, right? So if you did another face mnemonic from there, well, there's your mnemonic for the upper ledger lines. So the top 3 lines are A, C, E, right? Because that's F. And then I should say the top 3 ledger lines. The first, second, and third line above the staff is A, C, E. That, when factored in with the top line of the staff, gives you another face, right? Now, same thing works with the space face, right? So now we're back to the middle of the treble staff. We're on the first space, second space, third space, fourth space. We know that the 4th top space is E. That's also the first line of our line mnemonic. Every good boy does fine. So check it out. The ledger spaces, right? We can use we can reapply every good boy does fine. E is our top space, and the next 4 spaces are good boy do fine. All right. So let's say we have a note. Let's say we have this note written in notation. It's pretty high up there, right? Well, here's our treble staff. E, G, B, D, F, right? And then from that F, we can apply face. F, A, C, E. So that is the top line. Here's ledger line 1, ledger line 2, ledger line 3. So really, what you can do is count up or down with your mnemonics, just starting in different places. That's going to be my short answer for that. If you're not sight reading, if you're just learning a song, oh man, 3 ledger lines above the treble staff, what is that? Oh, well, that's just F, A, C, E, F, A, C, E. That's E, right? So that's your mnemonic use there. You don't even have to make a new one. By the way, the same thing works on the bottom of the bass staff, but I'll save that. Now, Lily May, when you're sight reading, well, hopefully you won't need to call upon your mnemonics to be able to do that, because if you're sight reading stuff with ledger lines, chances are you probably have those mnemonics pretty much down, or that you can recognize some of those notes up there. But what I like to do is actually see the ledger lines as a chord. So if I see the lines themselves, even if notes aren't on them, right? In other words, if I see a note that's 4 ledger lines above the treble staff, you're actually seeing 4 lines above the staff, right? The note is just on the top 1. And what I see is an A minor 7 chord. It's a G on top. Four lines above. And so I functionally see the full chord shape of all the lines, right? So if there's 4 treble staff lines, if there's 4 ledger lines above the treble staff, we're looking at these ones. So a high A minor 7 chord. If you see something that is 3 lines and a space, right? 3 treble lines and 3 ledger lines and a space above the treble staff, I don't really think of a new mnemonic. I just think of the same A minor 7 chord, but it's the note in between. That's F. A minor 7. If it's in between these two ledger lines, it's a D. So I'm not sure this is like a fully tested and vetted approach here, Lily Mae, but I'm telling you what I personally do is I see 4 ledger lines above the treble staff as this A minor chord right here. And that helps me a lot. And of course, when there's key signatures, you have to think if they're flat or sharp or what. But just at a glimpse, when I'm sight reading, I see something up there, I see it in relation to an A minor 7 chord because those are the lines. And you could do the same thing on the lower end of the bass staff. But we're going to leave it there, you guys. Thanks for tuning in tonight, and I hope you guys got another good glimpse into my practice window. Next week, we're going to be hanging with David Sides. The week after that, I'm still trying to lock in someone, but I promise to bring you another guest who can shine some light into their practice schedule as well. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next week. Cheers.